question for you, Bill. In your experience, can you think of any examples where code signing has gone wrong?
Yeah, you know what? First place I think of is the news for that, Dave. Now, it probably doesn't make mainstream news all the time, but there are quite a few examples that people have seen headlines for. So I was thinking, I tell you what, I'll give you an example of a couple prominent ones, and let's see if we can't identify them together just based on the details.
Yep.
Now, these sorts of things, every time I see them, they're always somebody getting into the build process in order to
Yep.
compromise the code signing itself. So there are really two ways to do that. You're either on the outside breaking in, for instance, some type of remote attacker, or even from the inside out in some cases. So how about this? SQL injection. So you have
Mhm.
some kind of public facing application hosted on the internet. SQL injection leads to a compromised network. Lateral movement takes the attacker to the build process, and there the build process is compromised and some malicious code makes it out signed. Any idea who that might be?
Well, there's probably a couple that come to mind. I think, obviously there's a pretty popular one that's out there now that I'm not sure if it was compromised through SQL injection, but very similar, moving laterally into the build process to get malware signed and distributed. And obviously that's SolarWinds. But I don't know if that's the one you were talking about.
Absolutely. That one wasn't SQL injection, but it follows
Yeah.
basically the same format.
Yep.
I've read some of the details about that one, and it's crazy the patience involved. Once you get that outside access, once
Nope.
you've compromised a single system, moving around, patiently waiting months,
Yep.
testing things with empty classes in the code, seeing if you can get away with signing it.
Yep.
Sophisticated stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was clearly the work of a very patient, well-funded, and very well schooled attacker who not only understood, the methods of attack, but also the methods of defense. And I think that was one thing about the hack where they really understood how people would be looking for the intrusion, so that they did a really good job of covering it up, hiding it, obfuscating it. And obviously that makes it a huge challenge for companies to try and defend against something like that, because how do you defend against the unknown, or how do you fight something that's already designed with your defenses in mind, right? This isn't the days of AV, signature based AV, where we've seen this hack before and we just spot it.
Yeah. Hey, Dave, have you ever used Team Viewer?
Yes, actually I have.
That's I
It's been a
read
little
about an
while.
interesting one. They so there's nothing wrong with TeamViewer itself in this instance,
Yep.
but there is a software developer that was running it and using it as a service for remote desktop.
Yep.
Through some stolen credentials, somebody compromised through TeamViewer that developer's machine.
Mm.
You get your privileged machine there, you do some lateral movement, maybe
Yep.
install some keylogging malware, and boom, that made a headline for CCleaner,
Yep.
which that was a popular one for cleaning up Windows desktop environments.
Yep. And I think, one of the challenges that a lot of times that we have in talking with folks who are in sort of the development community, or, are responsible for the DevOps in their company is, developers almost inherently believe that they know what they're doing and nobody's going to get at them, right? Because they're smart technical people, right? And they're not going to do anything dumb like have guessable passwords or,
Never.
anything like that. Right? Never, right? So, a lot of times there's sort of a resistance to locking down those environments, because developers like to be able to do whatever they need to do technically, and not have to worry about it. But when you get breaches like this, it sort of underscores the importance of keeping that development environment secure.
Absolutely. And speaking of these smart engineers and such, it seems like no matter what, it's only a matter of time before the human element comes into play.
Yep.
Even the best systems can't do much when a phishing campaign is successful and installs malware on some engineer's system.
Yep.
And
Yeah, and I think, as we kind of link that back to the code signing world, we see a lot of folks who are doing code signing, but the keys are on a developer laptop. Like, oh, he's the build lead, he's got the keys on his laptop and he signs it. Well, same thing. If he gets phished, or somebody in his facility gets phished and they're able to move laterally in his laptop, then poof, they can sign it because there's no real control over it. And I think that's one of the things that we talk about with customers a lot is you can have a dev environment where that's loosey goosey, that's fine. Have a development key to sign the stuff with, and trust that key only in the development environment. So that way you're not worried about, great, development key gets compromised, I don't really care because nobody's going to trust it outside of my little dev environment. And I'm also not, I'm only using it to trust to execute code that I just built myself, as opposed to something that's publicly trusted that I'm shipping out to 30,000 customers around the world.